Dr. Rajan, I should say a few words which are redundant for him about his bio sketch. Dr. Raghuram G.Rajan took over the charge as 23rd Governor of the Reserve Bank of India on September 5, 2013. Prior to that, he was the Chief Economic Advisor, Ministry of Finance in Government of India, and the Eric J. Klitcher Distinguished Service Professor of Finance at the University of Chicago's Booth School. He was also the chief economist of IMF during 2003 and 6. Dr. Rajan had chaired the Indian government's Committee on Financial Sector Reforms. Sir, we also refer to these 100 little steps. That's a great Bible for us now, being implemented. Dr. Rajan has attained his B.Tech electronic degree from IIT Delhi in 85, MBA from IIM Ahmedabad in 1987, and PhD from MIT in 1991. His work, academic work, spans a broad range of areas of financial economics, most important to the development economics worldwide, ranging from central role of banks in creating liquidity and the role of finance in economic growth to the nature of corporations and their financing. He co-authored Saving Capitalism from the Capitalist and created a lot of issues in his maiden article on the fault lines of US Bank in the subprime crisis. So in 2003 with Luigi Ziegels, he published this Saving Capitalism, and Fault Lines was published later, for which he was awarded the Financial Times Goldman Sachs Prize for the best business book in 2010. Dr. Rajan is a member of the Group of 30. He was the president of the American Finance Association in 2011 and is a member of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. In January 2003, the American Finance Association awarded Dr. Rajan the inaugural Fisher Black Prize for the best finance researcher under the age of 40. The other awards he has received include the Global Indian of the Year Award from NASCOM in 2011, the Infosys Prize for Economic Sciences in 2012, Center for Financial Studies Deutsche Bank Prize for Financial Economics in 2013, and the Central Bank of the Governor of Central Bank of the Year Award by Euromoney magazine in 2014. Thank you, sir. Please deliver your address.
Thank you very much. Shri Vinod Rai, Chairman, Bank Board Bureau. Shri Achintan Bhattacharya, Director, NIBM. Distinguished guests on the dais, respected faculty, members of the press, family members of the students, and of course, dear students. First, my congratulations to the graduating class, of course, to their professors, their proud parents, siblings, and friends. Congratulations also to Shri Bhattacharya for the stellar placement record of the students. I think he also had a part in it, along with your part. And to the faculty for their growing research performance and their undoubted capabilities in teaching. I also want to thank Shri Rai for the very important points he made in his speech on how to revitalize the banking sector. And I want to stress that the RBI has offered the Bank Board Bureau all help in the important work it is doing. Turning to the graduating students, if you're typical, you're very happy to be leaving university and embarking on a new journey in the real world. You're probably sad to be leaving familiar settings behind and you're worried about whether you'll measure up to the challenges of wherever you're going for work. You're also concerned about whether you've taken the right next step. Now, all this is perfectly normal, given that you've been trained as such a fine institute. The answer to the question of whether you will measure up is almost surely yes. As to whether this is the next perfect step for you, the answer is less comforting. You will never know. My task, however, here is to leave you with some last thoughts as you graduate. Now, as I was traveling back yesterday on the plane, reflecting on what I should speak on, I thought I'd speak on a personal experience that offers what Americans call a teachable moment. And then I want to give you a little bit of career advice for whatever it's worth. So, to get to the experience, let me start first with where India is. India is the fastest growing large country in the world, though with manufacturing capacity utilization at around 70%, and agricultural growth slow after two really bad monsoons, our potential for growth is undoubtedly higher. Growth, however, is just one measure of performance. The level of per capita GDP is also important. There, we are still, unfortunately, one of the poorest large countries in the world on a per capita basis, and have a long way to go before we reasonably address the concerns of each one of our citizens. We're often compared with China, but the Chinese economy, which was smaller than ours in the 1960s, is now 5 times our size at market exchange rates. The average Chinese citizen is over 4 times richer than the average Indian. The sobering thought is that we have a long way to go before we can claim we have arrived. As a central banker who has to be pragmatic, I cannot get euphoric if India is the fastest growing large economy. Our current growth certainly reflects the hard work of the government and the people of the country. But we have to repeat this performance for the next 20 years before we can give every Indian a decent livelihood. This is not to disparage what has been done and is being done. The central and state governments have been creating a platform for strong and sustainable growth, and I'm confident the payoffs from all this are on their way. But again, until we've stayed on this path for some time, I must remain cautious. We must remember that our international reputation is of a country with great promise, but which has under-delivered in the past. This is why we're still the poorest country on a per capita basis amongst the BRICS. We need to change perceptions by delivering steadily on our promise for a long time, by implementing the kind of program that Sri Rai talked about in his address. We cannot get carried away by our current superiority in growth, for as soon as we start believing in our own superiority and start distributing future wealth as if we already have it, we stop doing all that is required to continue growing. This movie has played too many times in India's past for us not to know how it ends. So in speaking to a foreign journalist the other day who asked what it felt like to be the bright spot in the world economy, I used the phrase, "Andho mein kana raja," or in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. The proverb has a long multinational history. The Dutch philosopher Erasmus used it in Latin when he wrote, and I'm sure I'm mispronouncing this, "In regione caecorum rex est luscus." You know the translation. But he was probably inspired by earlier work. This proverb is pretty common. My intent in saying this, and it was an offhand comment in an interview, was to signal that our outperformance was accentuated because world growth was weak. But we in India were still hungry for more growth. I then explained that we were not yet at our potential, though we were at a cusp of a substantial pickup in growth given all the reforms that were underway, the renaissance that Sri Rai talked about. In our news-hungry country, however, our domestic papers headline the phrase I used. To be fair, they offered the surrounding context, but few read beyond the headline. So the interview became moderately controversial with the implication that I was denigrating our success rather than emphasizing the need to do more. More general point is every word or phrase a public figure speaks is intensely wrung out for meaning. When words are hung out to dry, out of context, as in a newspaper headline, it then becomes fair game for anyone who wants to fill in meaning to create mischief. Worst, of course, are words or proverbs that have common usage elsewhere, because those can most easily and deliberately be misinterpreted. If we are to have a reasonable public dialogue, we should read words in their context, not stripped of it. That may, however, be a forlorn hope. That said, I do want to apologize to a section of the population that I did hurt with these words, that is, the visually impaired or the blind. After all, the proverb suggests that a one-eyed man is better than a blind one. A moment's thought, however, suggests this is not true, for the blind can develop capabilities that more than make up for their disability. Indeed, the sheer willpower and hunger to succeed of the disabled can help them become overachievers in a seeing man's world. Moreover, because their other faculties, such as touch, smell, and hearing, are more finely honed, the blind may add new perspectives and new variety to our world, making it richer and more vibrant. So I'm indeed sorry for implying the blind were otherwise than capable. But this leads to an important question. How much of our language is tinged with meaning that is liable to misinterpretation? How forgiving should we be of a bad choice of words when the intent is clearly different? Let me give you two examples. Gandhiji used to say, an eye for an eye will only make the whole world go blind. Clearly, what is implied is that the whole world going blind is not a desirable state of affairs. One might take umbrage, since it suggests blindness is an inferior state to that of being able to see, and the saying could be viewed as discriminatory. Yet Gandhiji's focus was on the absurdity of a policy of revenge, not on blindness, and his intent was not to disparage the blind. Anybody knowing Gandhiji's work would understand that. My second example comes from a faculty meeting I once attended, where a male professor used the phrase as a rule of thumb to make his point. A female history professor became visibly agitated and angry. She explained that the rule of thumb referred historically to the maximum width of the stick with which a man could beat his wife without breaking the law. She was angry that the male professor used the phrase so lightly, seemingly condoning domestic violence. He, of course, had no clue of the historical origins of the phrase and apologized profusely. Clearly, his ignorance suggested he had no intent to offend, yet the female professor was offended. There are two important issues here. First, if we spend all our time watching our words and using inoffensive language, or hedging everything with caveats, we will be dull and will not be able to communicate because no one will listen. For instance, an eye for an eye will only make the whole world go blind could be replaced by revenge reduces collective welfare. The latter is short, inoffensive, and pithy, but meaningless for most listeners who haven't taken economics. Alternatively, we could say the taking of any body part for another will temporarily reduce the collective capabilities of the population thus affected until they develop the faculties that will allow them to compensate for the missing body parts. This restatement is more correct than the original, given what I've been saying, but lacks zing, and therefore the ability to persuade. At the same time, not paying attention to words or phrases that give offense, risks perpetuating debilitating stereotypes that prevent advancement. When referring to bankers, scientists, engineers, or surgeons in the abstract, we often refer to them as he, thus perpetuating the unfortunate stereotypes that these are not jobs for women. The fact that so many in the graduating class today are indeed women, and the fact that they increasingly dominate these fields suggests that we have to remedy this situation. What should we do? I think we all have to work to improve public dialogue. Speakers have to be more careful with words and not be gratuitously offensive. At the same time, listeners should not look for insults everywhere and should place words in context so as to understand intent. In other words, for effective communication and debate, rather than the angry exchanges past one another that we see on some TV shows, we need both respect and tolerance. The greatest danger of all, of course, is that we do not communicate or debate, for then we will allow distorted stereotypes to flourish unchallenged and divisiveness to increase. In a country like ours, conceived and flourishing in diversity, that will truly be a disaster. Enough food for thought. Here is my promised career advice. Most of us in this room are ambitious and have career goals in mind. We think we'll be happy if we are successful. That is, become CEO of a major multinational corporation, a major bank, win the Nobel Prize, become a mega movie star, and so on. And to achieve these goals, we sometimes take jobs we dislike, for we think the pain will be worth the eventual gain. When we reason like this, I believe we have causality backwards. You're rarely happy simply because you're successful, but you're much more likely to be successful if you're happy, doing work you enjoy. Indeed, there are careful studies suggesting this, in fact, is the case. So when you choose what to do, don't focus on the end point. And since you already have jobs, when you're in your jobs, focus on the work that you like, getting to do the work that you like. Not only will you be more likely to reach your eventual goal, but even if you don't arrive at that end point, you will have had a joyful life. Advice over. Congratulations to all of you. I hope you have a very successful career. Thank you.